Viel Kummer und Sorgen gemacht, du hast verziehen mir, du hast gewacht. Gute Nacht, Mutter, gute Nacht.
You couldn't try to deliberately avoid the cathedral. You were aiming at your targets, but it's just by good fortune that the cathedral was missed. It was just good luck. The 1,000 bomber raid of the end of May 1942 stands out most vividly because nothing like that had occurred before, when all the aircraft were massed onto the target. And that time was a very clear night, moonlight night, and the whole area of fire there was, acres and acres of fire below, and the ribbon of the river shining through it all. And it really looked an incredible picture.
Group Captain Hamish Mahadi, 73, DSO DFC, a pilot who flew 50 missions, and eventually the man responsible for recruiting the crack crews of the Pathfinder force.
The crew that I did the majority of my pathfinding was the crew that we were nearly chopped over Cologne when we had a squirt of 174 cannon shells whilst we were on our straight and level run.
Bob Pointer was Hamish Mahadi's mid-upper gunner on that raid over Cologne.
According to the skipper, it was a Ju-88. I didn't actually see, only a flash of wings, and it was gone. The first hit put our turrets out of action. He hit us right on the hydraulics then. I couldn't do anything. My turret was absolutely, the guns were up in the air, absolutely still, and so I got out to see if everybody was all right. I went to the rear turret and I could see him moving, and I saw a torch flashing down the aircraft, and I went back to see what I could do to help. And I did give the injured wireless operator some morphine, put tourniquet on, and then someone said, well, I'll take over now, and I went and sat in the turret and just kept watch. There's nothing else we could do. There's no way to communicate at all. And we prayed. The skipper was fighting the aircraft. Very luckily, we got home.
Not all were as lucky. And as Lancasters became available in increasing numbers, crews who flew the older, slower Stirlings were not envied. The Stirling's more limited performance often drew the worst of the flak and the fighters. Norman Winch, a retired fruit farmer from Kent, was a Stirling pilot in the earlier part of the war, and a man who, perhaps more than most, saw his flying as a personal campaign to get even with the Germans.
Well, I had particular personal reasons which not everybody had for disliking them intensely. My father was killed in the First War, my mother and sister were killed in an air raid in 1940, so I hated them. And at the time, I just didn't mind who I killed, as long as they were Germans.
The Germans Norman Winch was trying to kill, and who were trying to kill him, were often mere boys drafted into the forces as the tide of war flowed increasingly strongly against Germany. Gunther Leonhardt manned a 4-inch flak gun. In 1943, he was just 16. Now a prosperous businessman, he runs a transport business in Hanover.
Like you in England had the Boy Scouts, we had the Hitler Youth. And we were trained by 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 years old boys that we had to be a soldier once. That was that time. The first night raids started, and it must have been by nearly 11 o'clock or so, a dark night, but we could see the stars, and then we heard the British bombers coming. After the Pfadfinders sent their signs in white and red, we fired, and the bombs came, and it's not easy to tell what follows. Daylight, bomb crashing, gun firing.
And that was when we were hit fair and square, after the bombs had gone, fortunately. And one engine was put out of commission immediately, and my right leg was broken by a piece of flak that went through my calf, broke my shin bone.
If we had hit a bomber, he usually burnt and was destroyed in high and came down, and we could see and watch them coming down, and so we naturally knew what we had done or hit it or not.
And we'd lost a lot of height by then, of course, and the nose dropped. So I gave the order to jump.
With great courage and a smashed leg, Norman Winch held his aircraft as steady as he could until his crew had bailed out, and then he too jumped from the crippled Sterling.
And it was, I don't know what, about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, I suppose. So I just lay there. I couldn't do anything else, having got a broken leg. And about 6 o'clock in the morning, an old lady tottered out of this little cottage, saw me and gave a shrill scream and disappeared. And I thought she'd sort of gone to fetch her chums down the road, and she'd be back and with their carving knives to do me over. But to my amazement, she came back in about half an hour, dragging a mattress for me to lie on and with a cup of coffee. So it shows nice people everywhere.
In fact, Norman Winch was badly treated by his captors before being taken to prison camp, where he fretted away the war, deprived of his chance for revenge.
The war was nearly lost. And you should know the German towns were nearly burned. The German families were one here, one there. Many of civilians lost their lives at that time. And so we just felt that we had to do that, what we could do. But I wasn't frightened, and my comrades weren't frightened that we could lose our life. Well, anybody could lose their life, if as a civilian in his cellar in the house, or if we in our battery position. And I thought it would be better to die there than in this burning cellar.
But many thousands did die in their burning cellars, as Bomber Harris carried his war to its logical conclusion. The saturation bombing of enemy cities in an attempt to destroy morale as well as industrial production. The end of the war saw the triumph of this technique. More and more bombers targeted on areas of high population. 593,000 German civilians died as a result of bombing, and nearly 3.5 million houses were destroyed. Harris's methods did hasten the end of the war. But was he justified in not making his bombers discriminate between ball-bearing factories and people?
Yes. Well, that is, they shouldn't be near ball-bearing factories, in my view. So, you know, I can't be opened up in this bombing civilians, killing women and children, because it wasn't just men that worked in Rolls-Royce that were killed in Derby, or Coventry, when Coventry was born. It wasn't just men, Jews that were selected from the gas chambers. The 5, 6 million, we'll never know how many million Jews went through the gas chambers. They weren't selected. So I can't raise any temperature at all about the other than saying Harris had to bomb Germany, and it's just as easy to knock off the Kraut in his bed than if he was in his factory.
We still looked up to him as a chief, but at the time we thought he was a butcher. You know, that's how he got the name. He seemed to be sending us out and killing us, and we had to go, you know, and at times we thought he was pushing it too much. Although I suppose in their way, they knew what they were doing. And when we get reports that the targets weren't hit very well and you'd seen aircraft go down, it made you feel a bit sick.
As they walked by the Rhine after visiting Cologne, the 5 veterans pondered their meeting with the Luftwaffe that evening, men responsible for the deaths of so many of their friends.
I think I should feel perfectly all right. It depends on what sort of people they are. If I imagine they're comfortable old codgers like me, and they will have forgotten, not forgotten, but it's a long time ago, and emotions have cooled, and I think everybody feels we've got to get on together if there's going to be any future for Europe.
German gunners, German night fighter pilots. They too learned to hate the bomber crews who killed their families and destroyed their cities. But after 40 years, would it be the comradeship of the air that survived on both sides?
How do you do?
How do you do?
How do you do? Lange?
Herr Doctor, how do you do? Lange.
Am allerbesten. So, bitte. Dankeschön. Lassen Sie mich rum. Take a glass, please, will you?
That's from the night fight.
Yes. I nearly got my captain up the rear.
But
we got home.
You not hit.
No, I had a small piece of shrapnel right side. Yes. That is, I don't know what sort it is. I've had it 40 years.
In which, 1943 or?
That was 1943, February 1943.
1943.
Over Cologne.
And over the Rhine?
Over Cologne, yes.
Over Cologne?
Yes.
Yes.
We had 174 cannon holes in the aircraft. We got home.
Mr. Weiler.
Then comes the pig. I will borrow the pig.
Good food, good wine, and the comfortable ways of peacetime and advancing age. And, finally, with the fighter pilots of the Luftwaffe, a chance to discuss tactics.
So big, therefore you can't fly every time.
Yeah. But we're flying along like that, and all you do is put a big squirt straight up my kilt. Yes? No. We turn around.
What does I do?
What about the
schräge Musik. Comes so.
Ah, and straight up there.
But that's not so good.
Suddenly the rear gunner reported night fighter coming straight out of the moon, you know, brilliant moon. And he opened up, and immediate reaction, put down full flap, pulled right back, and dived, and the aircraft went straight above and disappeared.
That's it?
Yes.
Yeah. That's defence.
Yeah.
I've told to you.
Yeah.
Full flap.
600 metres?
Yeah,
not,
600 metres
no,
you stood up.
no.
400 metres us, 600 metres your guns.
We have seen nothing on 400 meters.
Our guns reach 400 metres.
Yes, you can shoot.
Yeah.
You can
400
shoot
meters.
from 400
But you don't know where you're
Your
shooting
guns-
at.
see nothing.
Yeah.
Yours and I.
No, no.
Oh, I'm fair wore out. Yeah, I know. Well, gentlemen, I would like you to rise and drink a toast to the continued good health of the present-day Luftwaffe, and may it continue in its present form as a complete and absolute pathfinder and a partner in the NATO alliance which we formed today. The Luftwaffe with the Royal Air Force. Royal Air Force.
Oakington Church and the boys who may become the NATO airmen of tomorrow provide a parade at a service to remember 7 Squadron's airmen of the past. The survivors of 7 Squadron are now becoming old men. Their vivid memories of dead days and dead friends will fade with them. And then what is now as bright as yesterday, the story of the last war's bravest and most controversial campaign, the bombing of Germany, will become just another page in the history books.
Lord our Heavenly Father, we commend to thy mercy all who suffer as the result of war. Fill us with compassion for them. Prosper all who seek to minister to their needs, and hasten the coming of thy kingdom of justice and peace through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Here comes.
The war in the air was a very personal war, a war of individual fear and sacrifice, but even its terror is redeemed by moments of poetry. John Hankin, rear gunner of Lessingham in Norfolk, died during the making of this film, but he recorded his poem, Night Bomber.
Over the target, flak, night bomber. Within the temples, pulses throb and drum. The engines glow, their low vibrations hum, while from below the flak bursts closer. The aircraft bumps and weaves through heavy flak, and blinding streams of searchlights sweep our track. The deadly beams flood the long journey back.
I dream about war, not that war, but any war, and I hate violence. And strangely enough, I meet the crew again. They're exactly the same crew. And I said, well, I haven't seen you for a while. And we get into an aeroplane. It's not a Lancaster, it's another aeroplane. It's a new one, and there's a new war. And I think, oh, it's not happening again, surely. Because I don't revel in it at all. You know, this is not the case. I regret the necessity for it.